It doesn't take long to see a politically divisive comment on a YouTube video or a social media post. And with the United States elections coming up soon, it's getting even worse. We see people say things like, well, you must be a Trump supporter, or typical liberal post. And people are increasingly getting on edge and emotionally defending whatever ideology they support. But what they don't realize is that they're being played by the classic divide and conquer scheme. Governments all over the world, they follow the same script. They divide the country into two major parties with different views and ideologies. Usually you would see conservatives versus liberals. Now, this type of separation really fosters a cult mentality where individuals tend to vote based on how they were raised, or they vote for the party that promises to fix them and their family's situation. See, people aren't born as Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals. These different ideologies keeps the common citizens separated into their groups. And if they ever have a change in mindset, they typically would jump ship from one group to the opposing side while keeping the divisiveness alive and well. Even the so-called independent voters, they're playing the game that already has a scripted outcome. See, presidents, especially in the Western world, they're selected. They're not elected by voters as they would have you believe. Now, the reason why I say this is because in the United States, for instance, all presidents come from the same camp. They want you to believe that they represent the left or the right, but they're all the same, and they're all members of occult groups. For instance, if we look at some of the early presidents, they made it no secret that they were Freemasons or into secret societies. From George Washington all the way down to today's time, they show us who they really are. And George Washington, on his headstone monument, clearly says that he's a Freemason and first president. And they made sure to put the Freemason title above him being the president, because that's more important to these people than a so-called presidency. Here we see a couple more presidents wearing the Freemasonic fez and also the aprons that the Masons wear. And to show just how scripted the so-called elected presidents are, take a look at this photo where a young Bill Clinton is meeting with then President John F. Kennedy. Now, first off the bat, we can see here that they're doing a Masonic handshake. But you have to ask yourself, what are the odds that a young man would meet the president and then one day grow up to be the president years later? What are the odds of that? Well, the odds of that are much greater than you being a young person and meeting a doctor, shaking their hand, and then you grow up to be a doctor. Bill Clinton's presidency was scripted long before he even became an adult, and that's what they're showing here. Now, both Clinton and Kennedy, if we look at the gematria of their last names, they both equal 33, which is the highest degree of Freemasonry as we know it. So you really have to ask yourself here, is this just a coincidence? Well, I'll let you be the judge. Now, also, we see here Kamala Harris, who is now running for President of the United States. She actually posted this photo back in 2021 on Twitter of her walking the halls of the White House. And she's also situated between two pillars, which represents the pillars in Freemasonry, Boaz and Jachin. Now we can see here pillars both on the walls and also in the foreground. And she posted this photo on Twitter almost as if she's trolling the public, because it's definitely a Freemasonic symbolism. If you look in many of the Masonic lodges, you'll see this exact representation of the checkered floor as well as the two pillars. We even see these things in pop culture, TV shows, and movies all the time. Now, I'm not saying that Harris is a sworn Freemason. However, what she's showing here is her allegiance to the occult. There's no way you can look at this photo and think that it's a coincidence. It's by design, and she either wanted it this way or was told to take this photo by the people in charge. So there aren't any outsiders in these positions, these high positions. There's no one that pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and became the president of the United States. It's all by design. These things are methodically planned out, and it's actually pretty much the way our reality is supposed to go. It's scripted, and they leave the clues all the time in these types of photos, speeches, TV appearances. They're always giving us the clues as to what's happening. But of course, the majority, they're just not woken up yet, or they never will wake up to see these types of things, at least not in this lifetime. But now we get to the so-called savior, Donald Trump, who many people think that this 80-something-year-old man is somehow going to magically save them. But the truth is, there are no saviors, and especially not in politics, because Donald Trump is absolutely part of the occult as well. Here we see him with an envelope posing with a delegate from some other country. But we see here that he's holding an open envelope, and it's oversized by design because it's the exact same shape as the Masonic apron. He's even holding it by his waist the way a Freemason would in the lodges. And for those of you who don't know, the Trump family changed their last name from Drumpf to Trump. And Trump is not a 33 name. However, Drumpf is another 33 name. You see many of the people in high up positions, they tend to have 33 names. Not all the time, but there is a connection here with the number as it relates to the original Trump family name, which is Drumpf. And of course, we see him all the time doing Masonic hand gestures, whether it be handshakes or throwing up the 666, which can also be interpreted as a 33 as well. And at one point, there were a bunch of Trump mannequins dispersed around the country. I think this story made the news. But one thing a lot of people never mention is that the mannequins actually had on a Freemasonic ring with the square and compass, which that part of it never really made the news. However, this was also done by design. It's a signal to those who actually know. This wasn't a fringe group putting these mannequins around the country. This was actually done by the powers that be. And so we can go on and on with the different symbolisms as it relates to every president, including Obama, George Bush, Clinton, Trump, Biden, Harris, all these different candidates that are on the world stage. What we can certainly say is that they're part of the same fraternity. You have to ask yourself, what makes these candidates have something more in common with you than with the person they're running against? Which of these candidates are going to point out to the rest of the world that the other one is involved with Freemasonry or the occult? Well, none of them, because obviously they're both working for the same team while dividing the country as well as the world. And people get so worked up by their favorite news channels and pundits. They get really emotionally invested and they pick a side because they were told this is the way it should be. Or maybe those candidates are charismatic enough to really grab hold the attention of certain people. Whatever the case is, regardless of who you vote for, it's going to play out the way it was designed to be played out. Your vote doesn't change the outcome one bit. In fact, your vote is not even going to change your reality. Whether or not the president you wanted in office assumes office or vice versa, your life really remains largely unchanged. But people buy into these popular narratives and divide themselves exactly as it was designed. Most people are going to wake up the very next day after an election is won and go to work or school or what have you, and not a whole lot would have changed in their life. In fact, if you stopped watching the news and buying into the left-right paradigm and just lived your life, you really wouldn't be affected. In fact, you'd probably live a much healthier life by cutting out all of the divisiveness and toxicity when it comes to politics. And it's really a shame to see some people wake up from some of the deceptions in the world, like religion or the media, but still fall prey to politics, because at the end of the day, it's just another paradigm for you to be stuck in. So what I would say in closing is that hopefully you can wake up to this deception as you probably have woken up to others. And hopefully you, if you haven't already, stop participating, stop giving it your energy, because at the end of the day, none of these ideologies and these talking points come from you. Everything someone argues about for their candidate did not come from them. It's a thought that was put into your mind to basically cause division and to challenge the other side. And many people go to bat for these politicians and really don't know what they're talking about. They basically parrot these talking points and put them on the table. And even if you are conservative by nature or you are so-called liberal by nature, What they're doing is they're using your emotions, they're leveraging it, and they're forcing your allegiance on them, when in reality, the president has already been decided, and there's nothing you did to affect that change. So the less attention you pay to the circus, the more free time you're going to have, and the freer your mind will be in order to actually find yourself, find out who you are. Stop taking these talking points and making them part of your personality, because they're coming from outside sources. Unplug from the deception of politics, and hopefully you'll begin to build upon your own awakening.